Picking up from our discussion on moral cognition, let's dive into the heart of the matter. How do we actually make these moral calls? The argument here is pretty straightforward. It all starts with reasoning. Think about it. Ever tried to lift a law book? They're doorstops. This sheer volume of rules across every society screams that morality isn't just some mystical feeling. It's built on logic. Applying these rules, that's heavy lifting for your brain. You've got to mentally reconstruct situations, figure out what caused what, both the immediate and the ripple effects, weigh the potential consequences. How bad could it be? How likely is it? And crucially, you need to get inside someone else's head, understand their motives versus the actual outcome. It's complex stuff, often requiring years of training, like lawyers or priests, who are basically professional moral reasoners. Now, where does this reasoning muscle come from? Developmentally, it's clear. Kohlberg's stages of moral growth didn't pop out of thin air. They're built right on top of Piaget's work showing how kids develop logical thinking. It's like building a house, you need a solid foundation first. And neurologically, it gets even clearer. When you're doing complex economic calculations or wrestling with deep ethical dilemmas, guess which part of your brain lights up? The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, or DLPFC. It's the command center for cold, hard logic. Interestingly, people with OCD show this region going into overdrive during both simple choices and tough moral questions. It suggests that for them, the gears of reasoning grind extra loudly, maybe because they get stuck in loops of analysis. Okay, so reasoning is key, but morality isn't just about logic, it's about people. How do we grasp what others are thinking or feeling? That's theory of mind, and it has its own dedicated brain real estate, the temporoparietal junction, or TPJ. This area is fascinating because it doesn't just kick in for complex social puzzles, like figuring out who loves whom in Shakespeare. It's active when we try to understand the why behind someone's actions, especially morally charged ones. More activation in the TPJ means you're really digging into intent. Did they mean to do harm, even if nothing bad happened? People who get zapped with TMS to quiet down their TPJ suddenly become less concerned with intent. It's like turning off the empathy dial. Suddenly, the action itself looks worse, regardless of the motive. Alright, so we've got this sophisticated cognitive machinery for morality, involving reasoning, DLPFC, and understanding others, TPJ. But here's the kicker, it's not perfect. Our brains have built-in biases, like cracks in the system. Take the commission versus omission bias. Doing something bad feels worse than letting something bad happen, even if the end result is the same. Think about it. When you do something, you're actively choosing one path out of countless possibilities. When you don't act, you're just not doing something. Psychologically, taking action feels heavier. We need to consciously work harder, recruit more DLPFC power, to tell ourselves that hitting the brakes and letting someone crash is the same as swerving and hitting a tree. Another quirk, we're much better at spotting when someone breaks a promise in a bad way, like giving you less than agreed, compared to a good way, giving you more. We also tend to hunt for reasons behind bad events more intensely than good ones, sometimes even inventing causes where none exist. Let's look at that second point about detecting malevolence versus beneficence. A study laid this out beautifully. Imagine two scenarios. In the first, a worker pitches a plan. Big profits, but will trash the environment. The boss replies, environment? Pfft, just do it now. Imagine the flip side. Same plan, but this time it benefits the environment. Boss says benefits, who cares? Just do it. What did people say? In the harmful case, a whopping 85% thought the boss intentionally harmed the environment to boost profits. But in the beneficial case, only 23% believed the boss intentionally helped the environment for profit. See the asymmetry? We're wired to see the dark side more readily than the bright one, even when the language is identical. It's like our moral radar is tuned to detect threats more sharply than opportunities. Okay, so we know our moral reasoning isn't flawless, but many great thinkers throughout history have championed reason as the ultimate guide. Philosophers like Kant dreamed of a kind of mathematical precision in ethics, finding universal laws. Others, like Peter Singer, get frustrated when emotions or bodily functions creep into philosophical debates. He basically says, if sex or digestion are relevant, then maybe philosophy should just pack up and go home. For these thinkers, morality is fundamentally about reason. Emotions and gut feelings, they're just noise, distractions from the pure, rational calculation of what's right. The ideal is a morality grounded entirely in logic, free from messy human feelings. But here's the rub, the fly in the ointment for the pure reason crowd. We often make snap moral judgments without having a clue why. You feel strongly about something, maybe even passionately, but ask you to explain your reasoning and you stumble. It's like those implicit biases we talked about earlier, instant reactions based on us versus them, followed by frantic post hoc rationalizations to justify them. This gap between feeling and knowing has led researchers to increasingly focus on the role of intuition and emotion in moral life. Maybe reason isn't the king. Maybe it's more like a court reporter, taking notes after the verdict has already been delivered by intuition. Enter Jonathan Haidt, the big name in the social intuitionist camp. His view flips the script entirely. He argues that moral decisions are made intuitively, almost instantly. Reasoning comes afterwards not to discover truth, but to serve a social function, to persuade others, and yes, even ourselves. Think about it. When you argue passionately about a moral issue, are you usually discovering the answer in real time, or are you assembling arguments to back up a feeling you already had? Haidt's famous phrase sums it up: moral thinking is for social doing. And since we're social animals, social interactions are always tinged with emotion. So intuition drives the moral engine, and reason is just the PR department. How do we know intuition plays such a big role? Neuroscience provides compelling evidence. When we grapple with moral questions, it's not just the logical DLPFEC firing away. The whole emotional suite gets involved. We see activation in the amygdala, our fear and threat detector, the VMPFC and OFC, areas tied to value judgments, rewards, and aversion, the insula, linked to gut feelings and bodily states, and the AC, which monitors conflict and errors. It's like the entire emotional command center is mobilized. And it's not just random noise. Different types of moral problems activate specific combinations. Feeling pity? The insula lights up. Feeling indignant? The OFC is active, experiencing moral conflict. The ACC steps in. Even distinguishing between stealing from a sibling versus having sex with a sibling activates different emotional hubs. This suggests morality is deeply rooted in our affective experiences. And it gets even more telling. This intense brain activity isn't just internal chatter. Strong enough of activation can trigger our peripheral nervous system. You might feel your heart racing, palms sweating, get aroused, and these physical sensations can directly influence your behavior. Crucially, timing reveals the sequence. Studies show that the emotional and intuitive centers like the amygdala, VMPFC, and insula typically fire up before the DLPFC when facing a moral dilemma. This strongly suggests that intuition gets the first word, setting the stage for reasoning to follow. Furthermore, predicting who will make what moral choice is easier by looking at the pattern of activity in these emotional regions than just looking at the DLPFC. And this matches behavior perfectly. How angry you feel about someone's unethical act directly predicts how harshly you'll punish them. Emotion drives the initial judgment, and reason tries to catch up. The speed of our reactions also points towards intuition. Moral judgments often feel instantaneous, lightning fast. In fact, people tend to make quicker decisions when they shift from evaluating the non-moral aspects of an act, like the cost-benefit, to the moral ones. Is this right? This flies in the face of the idea that morality requires slow, deliberate calculation. Then there's the phenomenon Haidt calls moral dumbfounding. You have a strong moral reaction. This is wrong. But when asked why, you draw a blank. You can't provide a coherent reason, yet you feel absolutely certain. What follows? Awkward, often clumsy attempts to rationalize afterwards. And context is everything. Our moral compass spins wildly depending on our state. Smell something bad? Suddenly you become more conservative in your judgments. Hungry? Knowing a judge's philosophical opinions tells you less about their rulings than knowing if they skipped lunch. It shows how visceral factors constantly nudge our moral intuitions. Where do these intuitive moral capacities come from? Let's look at the youngest members of our species, babies. Even infants show hints of the commission versus omission bias we saw earlier. In one study, 6-month-olds watched a person repeatedly pick a blue object. When the person suddenly picked the red one, the babies got interested, looked longer, breathed faster. They noticed the change from doing something. But when the person consistently avoided picking the blue object, the babies didn't react as strongly. It seems easier for us to grasp the concept of doing something wrong than not doing something right. They also show a rudimentary sense of justice. Watch a baby helper push a shape uphill and a square block it. Later, given a choice, the baby reaches for the helpful triangle, not the blocking square. They prefer the nice guys and shun the mean ones. And they're willing to punish the bad guy, giving sweets to the good puppet and taking them away from the bad one. Even toddlers show secondary punishment, preferring puppets who punish the mean puppet. It's like a mini moral ecosystem forming right from the start. Okay, humans aren't the only ones with moral inklings. Let's look at our primate cousins, starting with capuchin monkeys. Franz de Waal and Sarah Brosnan ran a brilliant experiment. First, they taught monkeys a simple trade: give a pebble, get a grape, easy peasy. Then, two monkeys did the trade simultaneously. Both got a grape, fair enough. But then the twist. Monkey 1 still got a grape, but Monkey 2 was shortchanged, getting a cucumber instead. Monkeys prefer grapes to cucumbers, obviously. What happened? Monkey 2 freaked out. It would throw the cucumber, refuse to participate again. The paper's title said it all: Monkeys Reject Unequal Pay. This wasn't just about wanting a grape, it was about the unfairness of the deal relative to their partner. And this response wasn't unique to capuchins. It's been shown in macaques, crows, ravens, even dogs. Now some critics poked holes in the original monkey study. Maybe they just didn't want to work for a cucumber because grapes were visible? Nope. The rejection only happened when the unfairness was introduced. Maybe it was just about losing out personally? Again, no. If both monkeys started with grapes and one was switched to cucumber, the rejection occurred. But if only one monkey was getting a cucumber from the start, no problem. It's specifically about the comparison with the partner. Other factors emerged too. Males were more likely to strike dominant animals more than subordinates. And the closer the monkeys were physically, the stronger the reaction. Importantly, this behavior wasn't seen in solitary species or those with minimal cooperation. So, while impressive, it seems rooted in social dynamics and self-interest. This deal sucks compared to what my buddy got. What about fairness in treating others? Let's look at chimps playing the ultimatum game. Remember the human version? Player 1 proposes a split, player 2 can accept or reject. If rejected, nobody gets anything. It punishes selfishness. Tomasello and his team tried this with chimps. Chimp 1 proposed a fair or unfair split using tokens. Chimp 2 decided if the proposer got grapes. What did Tosello find? Zero evidence of fairness. Proposers always chose the unfair split, and partners always accepted it. Game over. But then, de Waal and Brosnan replicated it under more natural conditions. Their results were different. Chimp proposers tended to offer fair splits, but if they could bypass the partner's veto power by giving the token directly to the human, they'd happily choose unfair splits. It seems chimps will play fair, but only if there's a real cost to being unfair. Without the threat of punishment, the incentive to maximize personal gain overrides fairness. Sometimes primates do seem to care about others' welfare, not just their own. Back to the capuchins. Give them a choice. Both get marshmallows, or they get a marshmallow and the other gets yucky celery. What do? They often choose the fair outcome, both marshmallows. Similar results were found with marmosets, choosing whether another monkey got a cricket. This suggests a genuine other regarding preference. However, it's worth noting that several studies have failed to find this same preference in chimps. So, while some primates show hints of fairness beyond self-interest, it's not universal across the board, and the capacity seems weaker in our closest relatives. Here's where things get really interesting with the capuchin monkeys. Remember the strike when one monkey got a cucumber and the other a grape? Well, sometimes the monkey who got the good deal, the grape, also refused to work. Why? This opens up a fascinating array of possibilities. Is it solidarity? I'm not going to be the sucker who works while my buddy gets ripped off. Is it long-term self-interest? Maybe they realize that if they let the cucumber monkey get away with it, the cucumber monkey might get resentful and take it out on them later. Or is it hypocrisy? Acting against their self-interest despite knowing it's not strictly necessary. Could it even be a primitive form of altruism? It mirrors the complex questions we wrestle with about human altruism and social dynamics. It's not just about me, it's about us. These findings in animals, despite their limited reasoning power, lend strong support to the social intuitionist view. Basic moral reactions like rejecting unfairness or showing rudimentary justice seem to be driven by intuitive processes rather than complex calculation. Franz de Waal takes this further. He argues that the roots of human morality run deep into our evolutionary past, predating our elaborate laws and cultural institutions. It's not some divine gift bestowed upon us. It's something shared with other animals, rooted in our biology and social nature. This challenges the notion that morality is purely a product of human reason or culture. It suggests we're carrying ancient moral instincts forward, evolved for cooperation and social harmony within groups. Let's bring this back to humans. Many philosophers, like Mr. Spock, believe morality should be purely rational, dismissing emotion as bias. But consider Joseph Stalin. He believed relatives were special, deeply so. Most societies agree. But what about people with damage to the VMPFC, that emotional intuition hub? They lose this intuition. In the classic trolley problem, they readily say yes to sacrificing one relative to save 5 strangers. This is something Stalin himself wouldn't have done, and something most legal systems protect against. The VMPFC damaged individuals literally unfeel the moral weight of harming kin. This powerfully demonstrates that emotion and social intuition aren't just noise, they are fundamental anchors for many of the core moral judgments we hold dear. So we've seen arguments for both reason and intuition. Does that mean we need to declare a winner? Probably not. It's more useful to ask, when do we lean one way and when the other? Because there's a lot of overlap. Think about massive protests demanding action on income inequality. You could frame this as high-level Kohlbergian reasoning, operating at the post-conventional level. Or, you could frame it through Haidt's lens as a powerful resonance with intuitive feelings of fairness, overwhelming respect for authority. Both perspectives capture different facets of the same phenomenon. The more interesting questions are, what factors push us towards relying on intuition versus reasoning? And critically, can emphasizing one over the other actually lead us to different conclusions about what's right? This brings us to the classic trolley problem, the poster child for philosophical debates about ends justifying means. Green and colleagues took this thought experiment into the scanner. They presented subjects with 2 versions. Scenario 1, the trolley is heading for 5 people. Would you pull a lever to divert it onto a track where it will kill 1 person? Scenario 2, same setup. Would you push a person onto the tracks to stop the trolley and save the 5? Now, based on everything we've discussed, which brain regions do you predict will light up for each scenario? For pulling the lever, it's the DLPFC, the seat of cool, detached reasoning. For pushing someone, it's the VMPFC and amygdala, the hotbeds of intuition and visceral disgust. And the results confirmed the predictions beautifully. About 60 to 70% of people, with their DLPFCs working overtime, said yes to pulling the lever, accepting the utilitarian calculus of killing 1 to save 5. But when asked about pushing the person, only about 30% agreed. The more activation in the VMPFC and amygdala, the more people refused. This is huge. A seemingly minor change in the scenario, the directness of the action, triggers a completely different neural pathway and leads to a dramatically different moral conclusion. It shows how sensitive our moral judgments are to framing and the nature of the action itself. Why the difference? Green explored this. Is it just the physical act of touching someone? No, even using a pole to push still generates resistance. It's something more about the direct, personal force involved. Is it proximity? No, the lever is close to the victim either way. Green's hypothesis focuses on intentionality and locality. Pulling the lever, the death is a side effect. The 5 are saved because you diverted the trolley. The single death is incidental. Pushing, the death is the means to the end. You kill the person specifically to save the 5. That feels intuitively wrong. He tested this. If pushing the person was accidental, like lunging for a switch and knocking them down unintentionally, acceptance jumped to around 80%. The key seems to be whether the harm is an intended means versus an unintended side effect, and how immediate and direct that intention feels. Now, let's throw a curveball with the loop scenario. You pull the lever, diverting the trolley. But it's a loop. It merges back onto the original track. The trolley still kills the 5. However, there's a person on the side loop who will be killed, stopping the trolley. Logically, this should feel just as intentional as pushing, right? The person's death is necessary for the 5 to be saved. Diverting alone isn't enough, so we'd expect a low acceptance rate similar to pushing. But what actually happens? Acceptance rates shoot up to 60 to 70%. It's like the lever scenario again. Green concludes that our intuitive moral aversion is very local. It cares intensely about the immediate directness of harm. Complex chains of causality, even if logically equivalent, don't trigger the same visceral reaction. It's like our moral intuition suffers from myopia, discounting harm that happens further away in time or space. This leads to a broader point. Moral decisions are incredibly sensitive to context. Often, changing the context changes how locally our intuition feels the impact. Dan Ariely highlights this beautifully. Leave some Coke cans around the office. Poof, they're gone. Leave some cash, it stays. That tiny step of distance between the money and the person blunts the intuitive feeling that stealing is wrong, making rationalization easier. Peter Singer's river example is even more striking. Child falls into a river near your house? Most people feel obligated to jump in and save them, even if it ruins their expensive suit. Child dies in Somalia due to lack of medical supplies costing $500. We're far less likely to send the money. Why locality? Someone right there in front of us feels like us. Someone far away feels like them. Our moral intuitions are heavily discounted over distance, making the nearby victim feel much more urgent and deserving of intervention. Context dependency isn't just about physical proximity, it's also about language and identity. Framing matters immensely. Call the same economic game the Wall Street game versus the community game, and people play differently, driven by different moral intuitions about fairness and cooperation. Frame a drug as having a 5% mortality rate versus a 95% survival rate, and suddenly it feels ethically different, even if the numbers are identical. We also carry multiple identities: employee, parent, citizen, member of a group. Cohn and colleagues showed this powerfully with bankers. They played a game where cheating was possible. When primed with mundane questions, cheating was low. But when primed with banking-related questions, activating their banker identity, cheating increased significantly. It wasn't about being a bad person. It was about accessing a different set of implicit ethical rules associated with their professional role. Context activates different moral scripts. This context dependency leads to a common human trick, but this circumstance is different. Most wrongdoing isn't committed by monsters. It's done by ordinary people who make exceptions for themselves. We judge ourselves more leniently than others. Neurologically, we use different brain circuits when thinking about our own mistakes versus others. More emotional processing for ourselves, more analytical for others. We're more likely to excuse our own slip-ups. Why? Partly self-serving bias, partly different emotions. We feel shame and guilt for our own failings, anger for others. But a key factor is access to information. We know our own internal state, our excuses, our justifications, far better than we know others. So when we mess up, we easily find situational explanations, while judging others based on their outward actions. As Ariely notes, cheating isn't limited by risk, it's limited by our ability to talk ourselves into believing it was okay. So we've seen how morality bends and twists based on perspective, language, proximity, stress, and even hunger. It's no surprise, then, that morality varies dramatically across cultures. One culture's sacred cow is another's meal. Given this variability, two big questions arise. First, are there any moral universals, any principles that pretty much everyone agrees on? Second, and perhaps more importantly, do these differences matter more than the shared ground? Are we fundamentally different morally, or do we share deeper similarities? Despite the variations, there are some surprisingly consistent threads. Murder, theft, certain sexual practices, these are condemned almost universally. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, appears in various forms everywhere. Of course, the golden rule has its limits. What if someone wants to be harmed? Schwader proposed three broad domains of morality recognized by all cultures: autonomy, related to harm and fairness; community, loyalty and authority; and divinity, purity and sanctity. Haidt refined this into his five foundations: care, fairness, loyalty, authority, and sanctity. These provide a framework for understanding the common ground beneath the surface differences. Let's look at cooperation and competition. Henrich and colleagues ran a massive study comparing thousands of people from diverse small-scale cultures with urban controls. Everyone played games like the dictator game, ultimatum game, and third-party punishment. Two findings stand out. First, universally, people contributed more than pure self-interest would suggest, and they punished free riders. Cooperation exists everywhere. But second, there's a bizarre phenomenon called antisocial punishment punishing generosity. In places like Oman and Greece, people punished generous players more than selfish ones. Why punish kindness? The authors suggest it's a strategy in societies with low trust and efficacy. By punishing generosity, they might try to prevent norms of giving from spreading. It's a fascinating dark twist on social dynamics. Henrich's team also found strong correlations between cultural characteristics and moral behavior. Three big predictors emerged. First, market integration. How much does a culture rely on market trade? Higher integration strongly predicted fairer offers and more willingness to punish both selfishness and unfairness. Hunter-gatherers like the Hadza, with zero market integration, kept most of the money. Highly integrated groups split closer to 50-50. Second, community size. Bigger communities meant more punishment of unfairness. Tiny bands accepted almost anything. Larger societies enforced norms more strictly. Third, religion. Belonging to a worldwide religion like Christianity or Islam predicted higher levels of third-party punishment. These are fascinating links between social structure, economy, belief systems, and moral enforcement. What do we make of these? The religion finding likely reflects how large impersonal religions often invent gods specifically designed to enforce moral norms, especially third-party punishment, to manage large, anonymous societies. Makes sense. But the market and size findings challenge older ideas. Traditional views suggest fairness either evolved from small band reciprocity and got extended to markets, or it was invented alongside markets and laws. But Henrich's data flips this. The most ancestral-like groups, hunter-gatherers, showed the least fairness and punishment in these specific games. My interpretation? These economic games test a very narrow artificial kind of fairness, immediate, present-tense exchange. Real-life reciprocity in small bands is complex, long-term, involving countless exchanges of goods, services, information, trust. Market integration forces a shift to simpler, cash-based interactions that might feel less intuitive and fair in this specific experimental context. Another major cross-cultural difference lies in responses to personal affronts, particularly in honor cultures. Historically linked to pastoralism and warrior societies, these cultures faced a unique vulnerability. Herds could be easily raided. An insult wasn't just a slight, it was a potential prelude to violence. Therefore, unanswered challenges to honor were seen as dangerous, slippery slopes. Revenge became paramount, often demanded in kind. This led to cycles of vendetta. Think Hatfields and McCoys. This explains elevated homicide rates in places like the traditional American South, often between acquaintances, not random strangers. Legal systems sometimes reflected this, being more lenient towards crimes of honor. The pressure was immense. Come back a winner or come back in a coffin. The shame of losing a fight was unbearable. Collectivist and individualistic cultures also differ in how they enforce moral norms. Benedict noted that collectivist cultures often rely on shame, while individualistic ones use guilt. Shame is about external judgment, needing an audience, focusing on the person's honor, making you want to hide. Guilt is internal, private, focusing on the act, making you want to amend. Historically, the West often viewed shame as primitive, something we evolved past. But Jennifer Jacquet argues shame still has a vital role, especially when the powerful evade guilt. Think about scandals where corporations or elites seem untouchable by law. Public shaming, fueled by gossip and amplified online, can fill that gap. It's a tool for the weak against the powerful, though Jacquet warns of its dangers in the modern era of anonymous online attacks. So, armed with this science, how do we choose the best moral philosophy? Let's simplify into 3 buckets. Virtue ethics asks, what kind of person am I? Deontology asks, what kind of act is this? Consequentialism asks, what are the outcomes? Virtue ethics often gets sidelined, but it's crucial. The big debate is usually between deontology and consequentialism. Do the ends justify the means? Deontologists say no, never treat people merely as means. Consequentialists, especially utilitarians, say yes, if the outcome maximizes overall happiness. Neurologically, deontology taps into our intuitive, emotional circuits, while consequentialism engages our reasoning centers. Why does art feel non-utilitarian? Because, as Green puts it, our moral brains evolved to help genes spread, not necessarily to maximize collective happiness. The trolley studies reveal our moral heterogeneity. About 30% are strict deontologists, refusing both lever and push. Another 30% are consequentialists, accepting both. The majority context-dependent. Green calls this dual-process model. We're often a mix. Utilitarianism sounds appealing on the surface. Maximize happiness, be impartial. But practically, it's hard. And neurologically, it hits a wall. Most people reject pure utilitarianism when it demands violating deep-seated intuitions, like pushing the person. The problem isn't just logic, it's foresight. Short-sighted utilitarianism ignores long-term consequences, slippery slopes, unintended effects. Killing one person might save 5 now, but what happens next? Who else gets killed? What trust erodes? What bad feelings arise? It overlooks the strategic long view. So, the path forward isn't choosing between reason and intuition, but integrating them. Our best decisions come from engaging both systems. Think about it. Okay, sacrificing 1 for 5 seems like a good trade-off short term, But wait, if we do this often enough, what else might start seeming okay? How would it feel if that happened to me? What unforeseen consequences could arise? This involves running not just thought experiments, but somatic feeling experiments, as Damasio suggested. It's about combining the cold calculation of the DLPFC with the hot signals from the VMPFC, amygdala, and insula. This synergy allows for pragmatic consequentialism, considering long-term impacts and emotional fallout, leading to decisions we understand and can defend, not just gut feelings we can't explain. Finally, let's reconsider intuition itself. Are our moral gut feelings and instincts, or simplistic reflexes? Woodward and Allman argue neither. They're the end product of learning. Think about slavery, child labor, animal cruelty. These weren't always considered intuitively wrong. Our strong moral intuitions against them developed because of fierce moral reasoning and activism by previous generations. What once felt perfectly normal now feels deeply instinctively wrong. Our current moral intuitions aren't fixed, innate truths. They are cognitive conclusions that have become automatic through exposure and education. They are the sediment of moral progress. So wrapping up, the picture of moral decision-making is complex and dynamic. It's not a simple battle between reason and intuition, but a constant interplay. Context, physical, linguistic, social, cultural, profoundly shapes our judgments. The goal isn't to pick a side, but to engage both our reasoning and our intuitive emotional systems, weighing both the logic and the gut feeling, especially when considering the long-term consequences. This integrated approach offers a richer, more nuanced way to navigate the tricky terrain of ethics.